Next is CVS. I'm going to make a couple of comments just before we open the public hearing. Obviously, I think the people who are here tonight are, on this subject, our community seems to be in two camps. Some are very much in favor of CVS, some are very much against CVS. And that to me is understandable. There's no major issue that ever becomes before the town board or the planning board where you don't have people on opposite ends of the spectrum. I think it's important to remember that every one of us, we're all neighbors. No matter how silly you may think your neighbor comment is, I think it's appropriate to understand that they came here with the same concern for North Castle that you did. So I would hope that we keep the meeting with a sense of civility and decorum and give everybody an opportunity to speak their mind. Personally, I don't think any comment is a foolish comment or a silly comment. I think they all should be heard. But I think when people have an opportunity to speak, they shouldn't be interrupted, and they shouldn't be questioned directly. How a public hearing typically works is that people will sign up, even if you miss your sign up. I'm not going to not allow you to have your time at the microphone. But I believe it's important not for people to shout out from their chairs, as we've sometimes seen, not so much at planning board meetings, but we've all seen town board meetings where that sort of thing goes on, and I'd like to see if we can't avoid that. When everyone's had a chance to speak, if you have any questions, it's really not a debate here. If you have any questions, address your questions to the board. You can address them to me personally or to any member of the board, and we will then seek out an answer from the professionals in an attempt to answer your question. And that's a much better way than having back and forth conversations at the audience level. So that being said, I just would ask for that sort of cooperation. Remember, everybody who's here is a taxpayer and has an absolute right to their point of view. With that, we will open the CVS public hearing. And I'll say one other thing before we open it. Not that we would cut anybody off, but try to be respectful of everyone's time. And repetition is unavoidable, but to the extent that you can avoid saying exactly the same thing another speaker's had, that would be appreciated by others who are waiting to speak. And not to say that you can't make comments in any area, but understand this is a public hearing to discuss site plan issues. It's not a public hearing to discuss whether or not CVS is a good idea for Armonk or CVS is not a good idea for Armonk. That decision isn't up to the planning board. That decision has already been made by the town board. Town board has already issued a special use permit permitting the CVS store to open, but only if this board thinks that its site plan is acceptable to the town of Armonk based on our review. So to the extent that you can keep your comments related to site plan issues and not theoretical issues about whether or not this is a good idea, I think that would be that would save us a lot of time. With that, I will read the public notice. Notice is given that the North Castle Planning Board will hold a public hearing at the Crittenden Middle School, Armonk, New York, on Monday, September 24th, when any person may be heard in favor of or against the CVS amended site plan application for the establishment of a CVS pharmacy and associated site improvements at the Armonk Shopping Center property. The new CVS pharmacy is proposed to occupy 17,389 square feet of the approximately 19,886 square feet previously occupied by the A&P supermarket. The remaining 2,497 square feet is proposed as a new and separate retail space. The applicant is also proposing the installation of a new pharmacy drive-through window, various exterior improvements, new signage, as well as additional landscaping and pavement upgrades. The property is located at 450 Main Street and Maple Avenue, and known on the North Castle tax map as Section 2, Block 13, Lot 7A and 10A, and located within the CB zoning district. Do we have all of our notices back?
All paperwork is in order for this application, 40 out of 56 green cards for John.
Terrific. So the sequence of events from now on is that the applicant is here and will make a presentation explaining in some detail what has been in the works for some months. A lot of it is old information. I see a lot of faces in the audience that have been to our meetings before. Some of this will be repetitive, but there are some new nuances. So that's what we'll have Mr. Cavello go through that. And then once he's finished, we'll open it up for any comments or questions from the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the planning board. We're joined this evening by A.J. Barbera, who is the developer of the project, and Mark Werber, the owner of the site. Our presentation will consist of just two phases. One will be the site plan presentation by Paul Italiano, followed by the architectural renderings by Kevin Patton, at which point we'll be available for any questions. So I would ask Paul Italiano to come forward and take us through the site plan.
Thank you, Alan. Once again, my name is Paul Italiano. I'm a civil engineer with Madison and Rustling. We're located in Middletown, Connecticut. We also have an office in White Plains. I know we have a busy agenda tonight, so I'm going to try to be as brief as possible while hitting all the important points. So, as just mentioned, obviously the site was described in great detail as was our proposal. But the presentation board in front of you here depicts the existing building. As was mentioned, there are two access points, one from Main Street, one from Maple Avenue. One feature I'd like to point out is that the Wampus River is located to the east of the site. The 100-foot adjacent area line is shown here on the board. As I will explain later on, that's the right now. We are not proposing any work within that limit. As was mentioned, the CVS is taking a majority of the AP building, 70,000 square feet approximately. The remaining 2,400 square feet will be used as an additional retail space. I'll just walk you through the board if I may. Really, one thing that's important to note is that we're not going to expand the limits of the existing pavement. We are going to make some minor touch-ups to basically square off the parking that's there to make it compliant. So there might be some minor modifications of the pavement by a foot here, a foot there, in either direction, but increase and decrease, just to basically square off the parking and make it zoning compliant. But overall, the limits of the pavement are not being expanded. Actually, with the land banking that we proposed to land bank 25 parking spaces, we're actually reducing the pavement by about 1,500 square feet. As you enter the site from Main Street, you can see that long access drive that enters the site. That's where our work begins. Basically, all the pavement that's out there on site, anyone that's been there knows it's pretty beat up. There's a lot of potholes, things like that. We're going to mill and overlay the entire parking lot, so it'll be a fresh coat of pavement. And obviously, then the parking will be restriped. We'll be zoning compliant with the parking and basically be restriped to what it is today, the same number of parking, minus the 25 spaces that we're landing. As you look at the entrance drive, there's a sidewalk right now, an asphalt sidewalk right here. That heads down into the site. We're going to start our work there and replace that with a new concrete sidewalk. We're also going to replace the guardrail that's there with a nice wooden guardrail. So basically that's going to all be improved. And as you enter the site, as I mentioned, in addition to the restriping, we're also going to focus some of the work on the ADA parking spaces. There's 3 areas that have ADA parking. The first one on the southern portion where CVS is obviously the service of CVS. We're making sure that those are zoning compliant and provide ADA access to the building. The front door of the CVS is in the same location as it was for the A&P. Located right there, which obviously that's why the handicap spaces are nearby. Also, the other two locations that I pointed out for the ADA accessible parking is really to service the remaining uses there. The ones up against the building are currently existing. We're going to obviously bring those up to code, both from a striping standpoint, grading standpoint. The other two that are off in the parking lot are being added to actually bring the site into compliance. It was lacking by a couple spaces, so we're going to add those in. If you were coming in from Main Street or even from Maple Ave for that matter, if you wanted to access the site, obviously if you're coming from Main Street, if you want to use CVS, you can take a right and enter the parking field. If you want to go through the drive-through, you go along the front of the building, take a left. And then continue around the back where the drive-through window is. You would conduct your business with a pharmacist for pharmacy purposes only. It's only to obviously either pick up a prescription, drop off prescription, only things to deal with the pharmacy. You can't make other purchases there. And then you continue around the building, basically in a counterclockwise direction, and then either come back to the parking lot with the other uses, or exit out through Maple Ave or Main Street the way you came. Just to focus a little bit on the rear of the building, in addition to the drive-through grass, to basically make some other improvements to the rear, especially now the customers are going to be driving through. One of the main features that stuck out with us was the dumpsters. Basically, there's dumpsters are pretty much in various locations. There's no real centralized location. We were asked to look at that. We went through several iterations with what you see now. I'm going to just stand by the board and point out a few places because even though we consolidated dumpsters, there's a few things going on. The first area I'm going to point to is 5 dumpsters located in the corner, which will basically service the non-CVS uses. There's also another dumpster up against the building right opposite the area that I was just pointing to. And as far as CVS's uses, let me point to that area too. In that area there, I'm sure our project architect, Kevin Patton, could elaborate on that if there's any questions. We would have a dumpster for refuse material, then a recycling container, and also a compactor for cardboard. So there would be those 3 items. The dumpster and recycling containers would be enclosed and screened from anyone that's back there, as would be the centralized dumpsters. They would be screened behind the chain link fence and with slatted green slats through the fence so you would not see them. We also designated a few areas, I believe 3 areas for recycling in addition to the dumpster. The dumpster areas that we called out, by the way, the 6 dumpsters there would basically be divided up into both dumpsters and recycling, depending on the need by the tenants. We also designated a few areas up against the building that would be in chain link enclosures to have smaller recycling containers, which are currently being used today. So that it basically we try to maximize all the available space without going into landscaped areas. Excuse me. So we feel we were able to work with the owner, talk to the tenants, see what they needed, and make sure that everyone has a recycling and dumpster space that they need. Since we're talking about the rear of the building, I want to talk about the loading as well. One thing we are asking the board to do is to waive the requirement for the number of loading spaces that are required per the regulations. I believe we need either 4 or possibly even 5. I believe it's 4. And the board does have the authority to waive that. Typically, CVS only has 1 loading area, and I'll point to that striped area right now. And that striped area basically backs up to a loading door. And like I mentioned, CVS really only uses 1 loading area, so we would ask that requirement be reduced. The remaining tenants usually only use smaller trucks, since they are smaller uses. They would just have small trucks that would pull up in the back to make deliveries. As far as CVS goes, the larger deliveries that would utilize that loading area, that would be the tractor trailers. would be once to twice a week. Smaller trucks, like soda delivery truck, bread truck, things like that, would occur on a daily basis, possibly 2-3 times a day. Those visits are relatively brief and do not need a full loading area. They would just park very quickly, unload their stuff, maybe with a hand cart or something like that, and be on their way. So once again, we would ask for that waiver of that requirement. A couple other features I'd like to point out, in working with the town, we've obviously made a couple improvements or connections to the neighboring properties. One is on the eastern portion of the site in the southeast. Right in that corner would be a 15-foot wide access drive to the adjacent recreational center. That was something that the town wanted. The owner was amenable to that, so we made that connection so that it's a one-way circulation. Cars in the rec center will be able to access the site from the rec center. People will not be able to go from the CVS out in that direction, so that would be signed appropriately. The other significant improvement is the access to Maple Ave. Currently, that's about a 20-foot wide access, and while it does work today, whether, I believe it came from emergency personnel, whether it was the fire department, police department, did recommend that we widen that to 24 feet, which would be consistent with a two-way drive. Once again, we made that accommodation, and that's what's shown in the plans. In addition to that, there was a request made to allow the neighbor to the west, to allow that neighbor to have a curb cut into that drive so that they could basically share that access to Maple Ave and be consistent with the town initiative to reduce some of the curb cuts onto the road. So what we have done, and what Attorney Dobell can answer further questions on this, is we've designated an area where that neighbor could create a curb cut. We are leaving it up to the neighbor to select that location and to make that physical construction and make that connection. The reason needed for that is obviously if they have any plans for reconfiguring their parking lot, they would have to make that consistent with their scheme. We wouldn't want to just place something that does not work for them. But the agreements would be in place for them to do that. Additionally, it's not shown on this plan, but as that drive extends out to Maple Ave, we did obviously widen the curb returns to allow fire trucks and things like that to enter the site. Those turning movements were included in the plans. One thing we realized we could not do is on the west side of that drive, we were not able to have a curb return coming out of our drive. And the reason for that is that the existing driveway for the lot that the adjacent lot we were just talking about, their driveway is right there adjacent to ours. So if we made any kind of curb radius, we would in essence be cutting them off. And we would not obviously close them off until they're ready to make this curb cut in the middle of the drive. So basically it is up to that owner of lot 10 to decide when it's appropriate to do that. When they would close off their existing access on Maple Ave and make their new connection on this drive. So all those agreements obviously have to be in place, but that was the intent. In addition to that, the owner of lot 10 would construct a sidewalk on his property, shown here in the dash line. And that would involve once again, some planning on that owner's part, because he has an older garage in the way that he needs to take down to accommodate that. But we know that physically it does work, it is feasible. It'll just obviously take the coordination of that owner. What we're doing in the meantime is basically constructing our sidewalk right here. That way, when the time comes that the owner of lot 10 needs to install his sidewalk, he does not have to ask CS for permission to come onto the property or anything like that. The sidewalk already do that. We are going to stop that sidewalk short because there's a couple foot grade drop. So we're going to stop it short a few feet, maybe put up a bollard so someone does not think it's a sidewalk. We wouldn't want someone in a wheelchair going up there and realizing there's nowhere to go. So we will block that off until the time comes that final connection needs to be made. Just a couple other improvements I'd like to point out from a drainage standpoint. Really, we're maintaining the drainage that's out there. We're maintaining the patterns that are out there. As I mentioned, the land banking 25 spaces, so we're having a reduction in pavement. A couple of the comments that came through from the town engineering review was to take a look at the grading that's near the 88 parking near CVS. Currently, there's a catch basin located right in front of the spaces, which is not the safest location to have that. So we are adding a new catch basin, basically in that location, and that would just accommodate some regrading on our part. We'll have a deep sump and a hood on that catch basin. We'll also try to put hoods on the two existing catch basins in the drive out coming from Main Street. So that would basically help improve the water quality, help catch any floatables and trap any oil. CVS does maintain their parking lot well. They do come and sweep it. They do vacuum out their catch basins. So having that protection there will definitely help guard against any potential debris that might be collected. The other improvement from a utility standpoint is that currently the building is not protected with sprinkler protection. So the CVS portion at least would have sprinklers in it. We would run a new 6-inch fire protection line into the building. Currently it's just a domestic line coming from Main Street. We extend a new 6-inch fire protection line into the building as well. So that would obviously help improve the safety of the building. Another item I'd like to mention is the lighting. If anyone's familiar with it, look close enough at the lighting that's out there, you notice there's a mix of pole types and colors and fixtures and things like that. We're going to try to be consistent with this. We're still working with staff to come up with a solution that's satisfactory, but we are basically going to replace all the light poles to be consistent, with new fixtures, downward facing fixtures, limit the light levels to something that's acceptable to the town. So that's another improvement that we're looking to make. One very quick thing I'd like to point out that I overlooked was very quickly where the drive-through is. We are raising that grade up a little bit in order to accommodate that elevation right now. That part of the building is lower than the front of the building, so we need to bring that up to make the drive-through basically level with the front door. In doing so, we're going to have a small retaining wall. It's only about 3 foot tall. I'll point to it right now. And like I said, that wall is only about 3 foot tall. There'll be a guardrail and a wood-stockade fence to screen any views from the rec center or the town land that's over there. And also by land banking those spaces and pulling that wall as far to the west as possible, we'll be able to protect those trees that are out there right now. Right now, the site is actually densely vegetated along the perimeter with very mature trees. To the maximum extent possible, we're trying to maintain that. And for the most part, I think there might just be one pinch point in the corner where you come out of the drive-through that maybe one or two trees might need to be trimmed or may not survive. But for the most part, all the trees along the perimeter, both on Main Street and in the rear, are going to be able to be maintained. So we're very glad to do that. The other item I'd like to talk about currently is a pylon sign located in front. It's a really a tall, skinny pole with a sign at the top of it. CVS would like to obviously not use that sign. We'll still have to get approval from the ARB, but we have presented and work with the town to come up with something that would be acceptable. So we're proposing a 4.5 foot high monument sign to be located right here. That sign would be externally lit, which is something that the town has asked us to do. I believe at the moment that's it. I mean, you have to answer any slight questions now, or if you'd like us to continue our presentation on that, however you'd like to handle that would be fine.
I think what we'll do is have everyone in part of your team go through their part of the presentation.
Okay.
And then, because some questions may be answered, and you go forward, and then once you're finished, we'll open it up to the general public.
That's fine. Great, thank you. And I'd like to introduce Kevin.
My name is Kevin Patton. I'm a senior associate at BKA Architects, and CVS is proposing to occupy the space that is in the former A&E, and most of that space is underneath a roof. The other major element to this building is a continuous unbroken covered walkway that used to connect the former A&P with 3 other tenants, the pizza shop at the far left, as well as the dry cleaners and Made in Asia restaurant. The existing tenants are proposed to stay right where they are, not moving them, and we're going to work our facade improvements around them and their needs. What we took working through the ARB process was to design in a village-type concept. So we chose to take the building and create segments and blocks so that it brought the scale in. And in doing so, we looked at the hip roof area of the former A&P, added a gable element to the middle of it, and then we have 2 chunks on either side. And those chunk elements are repeated through the rest of the building. Just to the left of the CVS is a tenant space, about 2,500 square feet. And then we have the Made in Asia space, which is its own element with its own gable roof and pedimented entry roof structure on its own columns. And then the last space shares a chunk because it's fairly narrow, and that is the pizza shop and the dry cleaners. We carried a roof from the former A&P hip roof all the way down across the entire facade. However, it is broken up into either a gable end facing you or the slope part facing Main Street, and we also varied the ridge heights to give it interest. These correlate with and reinforce the chunks of the facade that we've developed. This also, because you approach the building from a higher elevation, shields rooftop equipment, and there's quite a lot of equipment on that roof, especially in the restaurant area. So we feel that this will significantly reduce, if not eliminate, any vantage points to that equipment. The materials that we're working with are a stone veneer. It's a natural stone. We are also proposing clapboard and shingle as a predominant materials throughout the project. I had mentioned that continuous covered walkway. We articulated it by varying its depth off of the building, and in some areas even eliminating it to create breaks in that facade. Right now it is an element that, it's a very strong element to the building. We felt that needed to be addressed. We also added columns to support our new covered areas, and in doing that we deepened the sidewalk by about a foot to add some protection to those columns. That was a suggestion by the ARB. We covered those bollards at the front with some decorative type bollard covers. We added a landscape area to the far right where the old A&P entrance is, which is where the proposed CVS entrance is. If you remember, there's a concrete island in that area. The concern is that the canopy has been hit several times in the past. We felt that we could help protect it by putting a landscape element in there, either a small tree or something like that. I'm just going to flip to one more view here. With this vantage point, you kind of see the ins and outs of the facade. In the top right, you can see the tree that we added. But further to the right, through the ARB's suggestion, is to articulate the facade. We did this through adding some bay-like elements with some shutters and a metal roof to break up that continuous brick elevation. The rest of the building, the other 2 sides of the building are going to be repaired if necessary, the concrete block, and then repainted in a light gray.
Good evening. For those of you who are new here, my name is Charlene Jacoby. I have been a resident since 1995, and I own Town Center Pharmacy. What most of you don't know is that before I moved to Armonk, I was the head of the export division of my family's construction business. I worked on development projects like U.S. embassies in Pakistan and Dubai, Israeli air bases in the Negev, King Khalid Airport and King Fahd Airport in Saudi Arabia, the U.S. Naval Base in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, and many more. I work with Turner International, Skanska, and Bechtel, which are three of the top construction companies in the United States. This experience has helped me understand the CVS site plan process, which is the second approval developer must receive before they can come to RMOC. This process is black and white. It is based on facts, not feelings or beliefs. It is based on expert opinions from engineers, science experts, traffic experts, and more. It's not about a pretty building or how CVS might affect the character of our downtown. That ship has sailed. So, if you want to stand here and say that you want CVS because you want a regular pharmacy that sells bread, it's too late. If you want to say that you think CVS would be wonderful for our town because you believe it will bring business here, or that toothpaste is cheaper, or you think that it's time RMOC stops living in the past, again, it's too late. And just so all of you understand, these were actual emails written to our planning department in response to an email request by Mrs. Cassandra Green. Mrs. Green, the wife of our chairman, sent an email blast asking members of the community to write letters in favor of CVS after the special use permit was issued. Why? Why is she trying to influence this board? Isn't the planning board chairman supposed to remain neutral and base all his decisions on the facts? Then there was the issue of the anonymous CVS survey called RMOC Answers. Who would have put out a survey after the special use permit was given, and why? Knowing that our planning board chairman has a home and business in Sarasota, Florida, I Googled his name. His address comes up as 5581 Broadcast Court, and what a coincidence, it's the same address on the anonymous survey. To connect the dots even closer, the company that owns the building at 5581 Broadcast Boulevard is GS Associates LP, 42 North Lake Drive, RMOC, New York. Isn't that your address, Mr. Green? Tonight is a night that we should stand up and protect our town from another disaster like the one RMOC experienced a few decades ago. 2 dry cleaners, one on Main, one on Maple, inadvertently dumped their chemicals which contaminated the water supply on Main Street. This was before we became environmentally aware of the hazards of chemical waste. These business owners certainly did not do it maliciously, but it happened. Tonight, the planning board is reviewing a site plan proposal from an absentee landlord who has violated our building and health codes for decades by keeping his property like a slum. And I have some pictures. Where the garbage piles up in the back and the wind blows it into the wetlands. Where the dumpsters sit with open lids and rats and other animals come for their dinner every night. Where a drum of oil sits next to the wetlands and a shack filled with food is exposed to the elements. This landlord is proposing a tenant that was fined $14 million in April 2012 for illegal dumping of their medical and hazardous waste behind its doors for over a 7-year period in California. How do we trust these out-of-town companies who don't give a damn about our town? We can't trust them, but our planning board can make sure that this shopping center is designed so that it will never be able to poison our wells, wetlands, and the Wampus River. The majority of the town board and the planning board are excited about having a pretty building where a dilapidated one stands now. Obviously, pretty is very subjective, but what good is pretty if there's poison? And don't let them tell you that there are safeguards. Dale Kissinger and Sam Morrell have spoken about how CVS's and other towns leave their garbage out. It only takes one time that someone improperly leaves photographic chemicals or medical waste outside to poison our wells and wetlands. This planning board should demand the best protection from the absentee landlords in our community. Another issue that is on the table tonight is the drive-through window. For those of you who don't know, CVS was not going to put in a drive-through, but the town asked for it. Unlike any other CVS or even fast food restaurants, this drive-through is in the back of the property. There is absolutely no visibility from the street. The town is not just asking for a drive-through window, they are asking for trouble. This past summer, there were a string of CVS robberies in Westchester. They are asking to put an extra strain on our already thinning police department. Councilman Steve D'Angelo pointed this out during the first public hearing. What, if anything, has been done to fix this very dangerous issue? Finally, I will leave you with a mom's perspective of this site plan. First, as a mom, my biggest concern is my children's safety. I am concerned about the kids crossing the Hergenham Recreation Center driveway to enter the building because it seems that the driveway may become an extension of the shopping center. Let me show you. So, getting into Hergenham, you go this way, and you're gonna cut through here. The parking lot for Hergenham is up here, so the children getting out of their cars have to walk down this way to get into the rec center. That's just an accident waiting to happen over there. And then, has the developer's engineer studied how many shoppers may use the rec center driveway as a cut-through? Second, the convenience of a pharmacy may be appealing to those who don't want to get out of their car to shop, especially if you have a boatload of kids. It is concerning that the drive-through is located near the loading docks, which could create a bottleneck. So, if you're driving around this way to go into the drive-through, the trucks that Paul talked about, if they're coming in this way, then they have to get online because it's too narrow to pass this way for unloading. If they're coming around this way, because the loading dock is over here, when these cars are leaving the drive-through, so trucks, they're coming into oncoming traffic this way, and the other problem is that the trucks have to turn and back in, so then the cars have to wait for those trucks. Can the engineer explain how these cars going safely to navigate through the tractor trailers and the delivery trucks? And I will conclude by observing that this town has a lot of families that drive large SUVs. My final question for the engineer are about the safety of the parking lot design. Why are the parking stalls throughout the lot different lengths? What size parking stall is considered industry standard? How wide are the parking lot lanes throughout the site? Can all of the parking spots be easily accessed by large SUVs? Can shoppers safely travel from their cars to the store? And can emergency vehicles safely navigate to all parts of the building? So, when the cars are coming in here, there's these spots over here, which are shorter. I think these are 16 feet, the other ones are 20 feet, but you can't just pull in here and park your car. You have to angle your car, back up, go back in to get into these spaces. So they're almost unusable. And it's dangerous if you're backing in, because other cars are coming this way and that way. I hope tonight that some of the planning board members will speak up and take a hard look at the flaws in the site plan and really critique it, the way you used to when John Delano was the chairman of the planning board. I hope tonight that you remind this developer that rules are rules. I hope that you don't ignore what everyone has to say, including our expert. I hope tonight you think about the community before your decisions, because if you do, there is no way that in good conscience you can approve these plans as designed. This past year, I have been to several planning board meetings where I have been chastised and laughed at by some of the men who sit before us. I have been ignored by all of them. When I submitted an economic report written by Kennedy Smith, who is a leading authority on the impacts of big box stores in town, not one member of the board said perhaps we should look at this before we make our decision. Kennedy Smith is one of the nation's foremost experts on independent Main Street businesses and economically and environmentally sound community development. She has served as a consultant in all 50 states, Canada, United Kingdom, Italy, Singapore, UNESCO, and the U.S. Army, to name a few. She has been featured in the New York Times, Forbes magazine, Business Week, and on CBS Sunday Morning. In 2004, the National Trust for Historic Preservation recognized her achievements, and she received the President's Award for her leadership and vision for creating one of the most admired and successful preservation programs in the country. Instead, these 5 men based their negative declaration on a flawed report that was commissioned by my dear friend Mike Ferrari, who was fighting to put a grocery store in the business park 2 years before. The same report that said there was a pharmacy in the A&P. You know, the one with the typo.
Thank you. Adam, there were a lot of comments there, but a lot of it related to the parking lot and the safety and circulation and whatnot. That's an area that I know something about because of my background, but rather than hear it from me, why don't you maybe give us a little bit of the work that went into being sure that this parking situation was as good as it could be. In fact, I think based on there, you're better than it was before.
In terms of the circulation, we looked at that plan closely, and we didn't see anything objectionable in how cars are going to circulate around the building and throughout the parking lot. With respect to the stall size, that is a code requirement. They're 9 by 18, and the code permits a 2-foot overhang, so it could be reduced to 16 in some cases. You can't hear? Oh, is that better? Okay, sorry. With respect to the Hurricane access, this is, in my opinion, a significant safety improvement. The way cars circulate in the current Hurricane parking lot, there's basically a one-way driveway that is acting as, that has to serve both directions. This will act as a release valve for vehicles to exit into the CBS parking lot. I would not expect a significant amount of the traveling public to use that as a shortcut for the very reason they have to drive very slowly through that narrow one-way access drive. An easier way to get through that intersection would be to go through the Maple Avenue driveway into the CBS directly. I think the board would be remiss if they didn't require that connection at this point. It's really a necessary safety improvement for the Hurricane Rec Center. We've been working for years to try to fix that problem.
One thing I'd add to that we looked at, because you always compare the CBS use with the former A&P to see where the trend was in terms of parking and use. The former A&P had in the neighborhood of 100 trailer trucks, tractor trailers per week in terms of deliveries. We're told by CBS that they will have about 5 per week. Now, these are the large trucks that could conceivably create a traffic conflict. But you have a traffic, it's impossible to have a shopping center layout, a parking field without an occasional conflict with a delivery truck because that's the nature of the business. The smaller trucks, panel trucks that are delivering bread, smaller items, will also be less servicing a CVS than they ever would a supermarket. So we felt that we have improved aisles here, we have parking spaces that meet regulation, and we were able to create a parking ratio that will be as good as any shopping center in North Castle. In fact, it may be one of the largest parking ratios of any other shopping center in town, so that I don't believe there'll ever be a parking problem here. And my guess is the amount of conflict between truck traffic and pedestrian and customer traffic will be kept to a minimum. Mr. DeBello, I know your traffic man is not here tonight, but I know you have done a lot of work on it.
Mr. Chairman, I only make one other comment, that is CVS's deliveries are controlled by CVS. They pick the time of delivery so that they keep their trucks from interfering with the normal traffic in the shopping center.
Sally Moran? Either one.
Good evening. My name is Sally Moran. I'm a concerned citizen of
Sally,
Long.
would you just either come closer or pull a little closer to you? Because
How's that?
Great.
Is that better?
No.
No? How's that?
Get close.
Closer? How's that?
Good.
Oh, I hear myself? Okay. I'm a concerned citizen of Armonk. I'm not a Main Street person, and I'm not a business owner who's going to be affected by CVS. But I am a homeowner, and I feel that CVS is an urban dwelling that should not be in Armonk. I feel it's hurt the integrity of Armonk already, and I think it will continue to do so if it does come here. I also feel that the process for for CVS has gone on too quickly. It took me 2 years to get a CO for my pool. I would hope that CVS would not get their CO for 3 or 4 years, if that's the case, due to the scrutiny that I received from the town, which I understand why they do it, but I feel that if I got that much scrutiny as a taxpayer, CVS should get as much, if not more. Also, the costs of permits and other papers filed came into thousands of dollars, which I would think CVS would be willing to pay for their big project. I do hope CVS doesn't come to Armonk, but if it does, I hope that all the boards, the network of boards, will scrutinize them as they do everybody else. The one thing I do want to say that this board really put a different tone on this situation. I felt very strongly that the town board is very negative and they're very unprofessional towards each other and towards the taxpayers. So thank you for being who you are. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Nicholas Cerullo.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nicholas Cirillo. I live at 11 Oregon Road in Armonk, and I'm not an expert in the field that I'm here to deal with, but I'm very interested resident in this area. Except for the issue of water resources and related stormwater, I respectfully request that you draw no other conclusions about my comments except my interest in preservation of our natural resources. My interest is based upon several factors. One, I have a well in my home and it has served me for the last 43 years. It is tested frequently. Two, I have been involved in 2 other applications dealing with water and the water resources. In addition, many years ago, I served for several years as a member of the Conservation Board under Mrs. Sluder's direction. My interests tonight are on the Wampus Brook, or river more appropriately, flow and the assorted wetlands and the storm runoff. Tonight, I respectfully submit questions to be considered by the decision makers as they request the depth of information required by the applicant prior to their making a decision on this issue. The first one deals with stormwater. I'm concerned about the runoff that will take place and the storm and the waters that occur in this area. Those of you who are in that vicinity notice that School Street and that environment frequently gets flooded, and it is very extensive and it has a frequency based on these storms. My question therefore is, how extensive and frequently is the flooding in this area, and how will it affect the property that this structure is going to be on? Secondly, if the services provided by the organization wishing to enter into the building involves photography and the processing of photographic material, I ask 2 questions. If the photography is for photographs, then what are the chemicals that are going to be used? And the second issue is, if it's digital, what about the inks that will be used in this case? The second point with regard to chemicals deals with the drugs and the disposition of drugs that have been accidentally spilled and or are not safely taken care of. So my question to the members for their inquiry is, have the applicant, or will the applicant be required to submit a detailed disposal program that is approved by the appropriate government agencies, EPA? I mentioned the flooding as the third point. The stormwater, if there is flooding and there is contamination, may contain suspended particles as well as dissolved particles. The question that I ask that be considered is, what's the synergistic effect of all of these chemicals as it enters into that water, flows onto the wetlands, then subsides and leaves its precipitates and or solvents in the ground. I remind you all that this area that we are talking about that receives flooding is frequently used for community activities. Children are seen playing in the area, and there's also a flock of geese, which in the past have given us considerable trouble, but is still a drawing point for many of the youngsters as they learn about taking care of these organisms, these animals. The next point I have deals with the flow of the water in Byron River. I know it's going to flow, I feel it's going to flow south, having looked at topographical maps. My question is, there's a large wetlands just north of New York City's reservoir. Will the water eventually end up there? The area beneath that wetlands is a reservoir, an aquifer, will end up there. The third factor I deal with is, does it flow directly into the Kensico Reservoir? That's a question that should be answered. The last point about its flow, is it going to go into Long Island Sound? To get to Long Island, does it have to go across Connecticut? Will the residents of Greenwich be appreciative of the fact that potentially contaminated water will be flowing through their system? The question I ask then to be answered is, where does the stream water, the storm water, end up, and how does it get there? The next point deals with the buffer zone. The buffer zone presented on the documents from the applicant, does it represent an actual measurement of on-site, or is it the draftsman's dimension and drawing? That should be done, that distance should be measured on-site. That is my recommendation. In summary, except for the water resources, and in deference to the chairman's request, I have no dog in this issue. Flooding in wetlands, flooding of the wetlands, and the potential chemical contamination is a grave concern to me. We often look at the tolerance level of chemicals based on the adult levels. But what about the children? And my question again is, which way does that water flow? Where is it going to end up? My last point is that of the buffer zone. We should not permit that buffer zone's integrity to be violated. I thank you for your time. And good night.
All were excellent. I'm going to make a couple of comments myself, and then I'm going to ask John Keller to be more specific in his response. But I'll just tell you that personally, every project that comes before us gets very strict scrutiny. It's certainly by me personally, and I think my colleagues on my right and on my left are very, very aware of the ecological impacts of everything we do. I always look at the stormwater controls. We are constantly aware that when an applicant comes before us, almost in every case, whatever the applicant's engineer has proposed, we increase the requirement for stormwater management beyond what the applicant might have originally thought of. I think this applicant has done a good job in addressing a lot of those concerns, but rather than hear it from me, John Keller, why don't you tell the audience, respond to some of Mr. Cirillo's comments, particularly with respect to the stormwater runoff and the river and where does it go? We do know it goes. We know where it goes and how it gets there. Why don't you perhaps describe some of the efforts we're making to be sure no evil things get into that water stream?
John, before you start, for any in the public who don't know, you should be aware that this board is assisted very ably relative to things related to water by the Conservation Board. They are advisory to this board, and when there's an issue that potentially affects wetlands, water courses, they very much are involved in giving us very good input, as is the town engineer, who will now give you his interpretation of this.
Well, the water does not go to the New York City reservoir in Kensico. It actually drains to Long Island Sound through the Wanders, and it does go through Connecticut. The town has a stormwater regulation that requires any new developments to provide treatment of detention and water quality treatment when disturbance levels are above 1 acre in size. The A&B Shopping Center is a fully developed site at this time. The applicants are not proposing to increase the impervious surface of the shopping center itself. And they are not proposing to disturb more than 1 acre of land. So based on the town's regulations and the New York State stormwater regulations, they are not required to provide water quality or detention treatments because they are not increasing the pollutants into the river or the volume of water into the river beyond what is coming off the property today. We're early on in the process. We discussed the stormwater regulations with the applicant's engineers, and we asked for water quality treatment to be proposed with the development. And the applicant has stated that they will provide water quality treatment. The final details have not specifically been completed as of yet, but it is a requirement that we requested. The applicant will, if he disturbs more than 5,000 square feet of vegetation or earth disturbance, be required to provide what is a stormwater pollution prevention plan. That plan would document the erosion and sediment controls that are required during construction to protect downstream wetlands and watercourses from any contaminants which may come off the property or erosion which may come off the property during the construction process. They have prepared a erosion the sediment control plan, which has been submitted to the board to be reviewed and commented on. But besides the plan, the stormwater document would be required to be submitted before they start construction. They will also be required to provide weekly inspections of the construction by a professional engineer or a certified inspector for erosion controls. The documents would be on site. The inspector would have to fill out daily reports, which will be submitted to the town and also maintained on site. This is all in conformance with both the town stormwater regulations and the state's.
Thank you, John. And I'd like to, you did bring up something that never occurred to me, and so shame on me, but I have no idea what CVS does with photographic chemicals. And I'm wondering if we have anyone here tonight that can answer that question. I'm sure we can get an answer, but perhaps you could tell us what you know.
At this location and all development locations that CVS is currently doing these days is what's called a dry digital lab. There are no buckets of chemicals. There's no, it's essentially a laser printer cartridge. It is delivered and picked up by an outside company that maintains its stock. The amount that's kept there on site is completely dependent on how much customer use it is of the printer. But it's very similar to what many of you may have at home. Just uses a different paper.
And are there drug disposal issues? In other words, if drugs go out of date or can't be used when they're out, what happens to those? Because the concern, I think, that Mr. Cirillo was saying that those get dumped into the trash or flushed out the road. What happens?
I am definitely not an expert in how they dispose of that, but I would be shocked if they did it in that manner. That just doesn't seem right to me, but I can inquire at the corporation and find out what their program is.
AJ may have an answer for us, a little bit more detail.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, for the record, my name is AJ Barbado from Gershman Brown Crowley. One of the additional things that they have to follow is they're also regulated by the New York Board of Pharmacy, which also has its own regulations for patient confidentiality and drug security and such. And one of the main things with how their drugs are delivered to the store through the CVS trucks is that they're not dropped off by a third-party vendor. They're plastic CVS cartons, so that in addition to minimizing waste, there's a continual flow of goods back and forth from the store and back and forth into their supply chain. So when if they have too much Prozac or something, it's not thrown in the trash in the bathroom. It's sent back in those containers with the truck when it comes the following week, and it goes back to the distribution center where we have stored and back into their supply chain where it's accounted for and disposed or sent back to a wholesaler or however it goes. One of the other things that I'm not an expert on pharmacy internal operations, but they don't do compounding in this location, which some pharmacies do, providing drugs for kidney care or more hospital type drugs where you're actually mixing up substances and chemicals.
Thank you. Come up to the mic and sir.
Issue with medical waste, CVS gives flu shots, there's syringes, how do they dispose of that? That's, the drugs, I think we all know how that's done. There's companies that come and take away your expired drugs. I think it's more the syringes that are coming from the flu shots that's the issue with the medical waste. Like, the safety, because if that gets into the water system, that's a problem.
Thank you, Charlie. AJ, maybe we could, you could speak with whoever it is at CBS, and yes, I'm sure they have internal protocols. I think we would like to have copies of that in our files, so we have something to refer to. I would like to know, I think we would all like to know exactly how any hazardous materials, whether it's leftover drug, syringes, waste products of any kind that could be hazardous, what is the CBS protocol for managing that waste stream? I mean, one other comment. I know from what John Keller told you, this applicant really would, under law, be required to do very little, almost nothing with their stormwater management because of the small areas that were being disturbed. However, we did require them to do, and they, in fact, they didn't fight at all. We are adding catch basins. We are enlarging catch basins so that, and the catch basin, the ones that are going in have a larger sump. Sump is the area that collects solid waste that sink to the bottom so that before it flows out. And those sumps can be cleaned out by vacuum trucks so that that waste never gets into the water stream. And they, at the last meeting that we had with them, they agreed to add hoods to every catch basin. A hood is a device that prevents floating waste from flowing out of the catch basin pipe. Because picture a pipe, picture the exit pipe when it comes into the catch basin, dips down below the level of water. So anything that's floating is trapped into that catch basin and can again be scooped out and cleaned on site before it ever gets out into the water stream. So it's not something that we have ignored or taken lightly. Next speaker, Jeff Baker. Right after Mr. Baker, so sure. Or he's yielding to you, so.
I appreciate it. I believe I can talk loud enough so everyone hears.
No, because we need to, we need it
I got you.
on the record.
Thank you very much, and thank you for allowing me to precede you. The question that was raised, with all due respects to the presentation from the town engineer, and I think there's a thorough study involved there, the previous business, to my knowledge, did not do photographic or chemicals. So I don't know how that impacts on the decision that you go forward to the next step. The second one is an even more demanding request on my part. Recently, I had the opportunity to review the maps presented for the flow of water. And after a careful examination, it was disclosed to me that the map presented was inaccurate. And so I'm suggesting that the maps that you use are the best and latest representation of how things actually flow, how the water, both surface and subsurface, and also what's the condition that has to be met with regard to water flowing across the state lines that may be potentially contaminated. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jeff Baker. I'm the attorney for Concerned Citizens of Armonk. Start off by handing out some comments. For myself and an engineer retained by Concerned Citizens of Armonk, and let me preface this with a few initial comments. Mr. Green is correct when he said that our comments here do not go to the use of the CBS. That was a previous determination of the planning board, the subject of the negative declaration of this board. That is under litigation. We are confident that those decisions are going to be overturned because there was such a wholesale deprivation of due process by the planning board and the town board, refusing to consider the reports and comments that were led citizens. Now, I would hope, and it would appear, Mr. Chairman, that you're going to do a better job on this round. But I would also note that the record is strikingly incomplete. As the planning board secretary is well aware, and much to her dismay, I'm sure, is that we made regular requests for documents and the review of the file to make sure we have everything that's there so we can appropriately comment on what's there. Except we were surprised to learn about the August 16, 2012 memo from Keller Sessions, the town engineer, and the September 7th memo from Mr. Kaufman, the director of planning, both of which are referenced in the latest submission by the applicant. Those have not been made available, and we are not given the benefit of commenting on those, especially as the views of the town have continued. So I think it's going to be necessary that this public hearing be kept open and that information be provided. And it's not just that information in those two memos. As Mr. Keller pointed out, and what I find is one of the most striking things of the planning board's seemingly willingness to move forward with a site plan approval for this, is that you don't have basic information related to stormwater controls and water quality measures to make sure that they work. You are deferring and delegating that authority to the town engineer as is being presented in the draft resolution. Mr. Kaufman, excuse me, let me correct that. The draft resolution makes conclusory statements. In fact, it repeats the language of this negative declaration that simply states the stormwater will be mitigated and will be treated without any information to support that determination. You cannot delegate that authority and deny the public the opportunity to review and comment on it and to make that determination. Your regulations are strikingly clear. The stormwater plans have to be approved prior to site plan approval by this board, so there's an opportunity to review it. Now, obviously, this is a developed site, and the same stormwater rules do not apply to this site as applies to a greenfield site. However, North Castle is an MS4 community, and the MS4 regulations recognize that when you are undergoing significant redevelopment of a site, there's an opportunity to improve stormwater controls that have otherwise escaped review because they predate modern environmental laws. That is a given. I submit to you that by repaving the entire property and by rebuilding and designing the structure, they cross the threshold that triggers a review and your obligations as an MS4 municipality to do your best to reduce the stormwater controls. It's not the same standard as if you're working from a greenfield site, but it doesn't mean you ignore the situation. And those plans need to be available for the public to have a right to review them. Because what goes along with that, and again, it's been noted in your comments, and as proposed conditions under the resolution, is you do not have any confirmation on either the boundaries of the Wampus River or the wetlands that are there to determine the extent of the 100-foot adjacent area. You have a statement by the applicant that his consultant delineated it, but again, I'm not aware of any delineation report. I'm not aware of any confirmation of that delineation by either DEC, the town engineer, town wetlands consultant, or the Army Corps of Engineers. As I'm sure you're well aware, the town of North Council regulates wetlands beyond simply those that are mapped by DEC, and essentially adopts the definition of for federal wetlands. So you need to have a confirmation of the presence of those wetlands before you can determine the balance of the site plan analysis. That cannot be put off for a later determination by the town engineer that then gets initialed by the planning board secretary. That is a violation of your requirement. With regards to the circulation and parking and the issue of the drive-through, I would like to remind you that there is no inherent right by CBS to have a drive-through in this location, and certainly in the manner in which they have presented it, which is shoehorning it behind the property that is in inherently tight and restricted condition. It would appear that you are relying extensively on representations by the applicant regarding the numbers and types and frequency of the truck deliveries that come to CBS. Let me remind you, CBS is not the applicant here. And unless I'm mistaken, and I can be corrected if I'm wrong, I don't recall ever seeing anything in these documents that is a CBS document and a statement by CBS as to the nature of what they're doing. I see references by the real estate company that's trying to get the approval of the project so they can lease it out to CVS. I see statements by the engineers associated with the project attesting to what happened. But those are the same engineers who said there used to be a pharmacy in the A&P. So I don't see any empirical proof of the numbers and types of vehicles that are going to be there for delivery. Moreover, I see no statements by the other tenants of the other buildings as to the nature of their deliveries and how reducing the number of loading docks would be appropriate. In fact, Mr. Kaufman, in his most recent memorandum to you that was released on Friday, says that they were asking for a waiver of the loading dock requirement, but they still must provide you the information of it. So obviously, he's not satisfied that the information has been provided, because he hasn't said they provided the information. He's written as like we're still waiting for that information. And finally, because you don't even have any statement by CBS, your draft resolution provides absolutely no conditions or limitations governing the manner of deliveries and assuring that there isn't any conflict. At the very minimum, if that's going to be your handling, that has to be embodied as a site plan condition, much as your draft conditions include limitations on the hours of operations. Anything that is being represented anywhere in these plans by GP Northeast is not binding on CBS or it's put into your site plan. Everything has to be a condition that you're relying on, otherwise it is a completely empty promise and cannot be enforced. And if there's any objection, they would have to having those kind of conditions included on the site plan. That's a red flag, that there's a warning they don't plan to really abide by it. This shopping center's been there over 4 years, getting close to 50 years. It has been allowed to deteriorate with minimal, if any, investment. But for the activities of concerned citizens of Armonk, this application wouldn't even be before you. The leaders of this town were prepared to allow the project to go forward simply on a building permit, without any of the improvements to the facility, many of which you have appropriately insisted on, and I think in many ways you've done a good job in terms of trying to improve some of that, and I do commend you because it is looking better. And while CCA is dead set opposed to the nature of the use of the property is going to be used in terms of a big box national retailer, we support redevelopment of the project in a manner that is consistent with the retail uses that are compatible with the hamlet of Armonk. And that behooves you, as I think you're making an effort to do, to make sure it is properly designed. But you have to complete the effort and get those details in front of you, and the public needs an opportunity to review and comment on it. And that's why this public hearing needs to be kept open. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Made note of your comments. I'll ask you to submit, or Roland, you tell me if it seems to me that Mr. Baker is saying that he has missing documents. Perhaps if you just let Mr. Barone know, we certainly have no reason whatsoever for withholding any documents. I suppose something could have slipped and not got to you, but believe me, it would have been not intentional. So just let Mr. Barone know, and we'll certainly get whatever you need to. Mr. Baum?
Chairman, members of the board, my comments will be brief.
Can you state your name, I'm sorry?
My name is Neil Baumann, Nealbaum-N-A-N. I am a 25-year resident of Armonk, and I have no economic interest in the project that we're discussing. Adam, I have a great deal of respect for you, but I will disagree on a couple of the points that you raised. I want to talk about something very specific. As the chairman and Adam probably knows, I was on the recreation board here for 6 years, and we discussed a similar plan with a cutout. However, that plan would have included a wraparound driveway on the western edge of the project, so it would allow traffic to go in and out onto Maple Avenue. And that curb cut would have been restricted from parking, from traffic going in and out of the CVS. Of course, the rest is history on that proposal. As far back as the old A&P, traffic would cut through the A&P property from Maple Avenue in order to get to 128 North. It was a common practice, and it still exists on that property today. There are still people, once they see that traffic backed up at the light of 128 Maple with a no right turn until 7, people cut through. Fast forward to a situation with CVS up and running, with Armonk Square up and running, and the additional development that we know is in the process and will eventually be submitted along Maple Avenue. You're going to have delivery trucks going left or right into Armonk Square off of Maple, delivery trucks going left or right into CVS off of Maple. You're going to have traffic entering both Armonk Square and CVS. We're going to have through traffic backed up at the light going to 128. And eventually, it's inevitable that many people are going to cut through that Herkingham entrance in order to gain access to CVS or for a shortcut. For our civil engineering gentleman here, I think there's this sort of a common phrase, if you build it, they will come when it comes to traffic and roadways and things of that nature. People will eventually find that cutout. It clearly is a dangerous situation in Herkingham, where you have one-way traffic in and one-way out. However, that traffic tends to be relatively slow. It's a problem, but then when you get people without having much of a concern as to who is using Herkingham, young kids, senior citizens, the public in general, people are going to be cutting through here. Although well-intentioned, I think that this site plan and that specific cutout, although, again, well-intentioned, I think it makes sense to do something with Herkingham. I think this will create a dangerous situation, and due to the congestion that is going to be inevitable on that street, you'll have many, many people cutting through. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Norman. I have to tell you, the interesting part about that curb cut is that this was a requirement that the planning department, planning board put on to Mr. Werber. He didn't want to do it. I don't think it matters to CBS, but Mr. Werber didn't want to do it because it's just an expense to him. It was in our judgment and the wisdom of the planning department and its traffic people that would be a good thing. I suppose if it turns out that you're right and it turns out to be a bad thing, it can be reversed, because certainly it's we're doing this because we think it's a benefit to North Castle residents and the people who use Herkingham. If we're wrong, that will become obvious and that decision could be revisited. Finally, Jeff Garson.
Jeff Garson, and I own the Armonk Town Center. First, I just want to make it clear that I'm not talking from a position of bias or self-interest when I address the board, because whether it's CBS or other retailers that are going to come into the space, I'm still competing with, let's just say, 20,000 square feet of new retail space that's coming in. So whether it's CVS or a bunch of pizza parlors and nail salons and so on and so forth, I'm still competing with Mr. Werber, who owns retail space, regardless. So my concern is with the drive-through and the traffic in the back of the shopping center. If you recall, when we were talking about the old A&P proposal, there was a lot of focus given to what was going on behind the shopping center, not only with respect to ordinary traffic, but also with respect to fire vehicles, and the number of turns even that an 18-wheeler would have to make to get in and out. So now the situation is complicated by putting in a drive-through window. So if you're complicating it by putting in a drive-through window, which I think is a balancing act for anyone to do themselves, it seems to me that a drive-through window could be just as devastating as the number of tractor trailers that would be coming in or out of an A&P. So in conclusion, to go ahead and to allow the applicant to get relief of the number of loading docks that's required, I think is just completely inappropriate and self-serving to the interests of people that just want to rush this project through.
Thank you. And, you know, Mr. Carson, I appreciate that concern, and it's not an unreasonable concern. To put it in a little perspective, from my own background in the industry, I can tell you, and it's a pretty well-known fact, that a drugstore has far fewer truck deliveries than a grocery store. And you got to keep in mind that next door, the DeChico's Market, which is 25,000 square feet, also, and which under code would have required 4 loading docks, perhaps 5, depending on how you measure it, got an application approved not by this board but by previous boards to reduce that loading to 1 dock. So I'm not saying that they should have got that, but
Aren't you just further complicating the problem?
well, no, because the sites are completely different.
But they're right across the street from each other.
Well, they are, but the trucks that are delivering and potentially creating a problem for Farmwork Square, and I hope it doesn't happen, won't have any effect on the trucks that are delivering at CVS. They're just, as you know, 2 different sites.
So then,
I'm just
Mr.
pointing
Chairman,
out.
are the rules? Are they sometimes applied, sometimes not applied, close enough, but not quite there? I mean, what does it mean?
Well, I can't give you any more answer than I just did. Thank you. There's nobody else on the list, but that doesn't mean that if you don't want to speak, Mr. Faber would like to say something.
John Faber, Chairman of the Conservation Board. Since we were mentioned a few times, I thought I'd just say a few words for the record.
Pull that microphone a little down a little, John.
Okay. Just say a few things for the record. In August, we sent a letter to the planning board identifying several items with the hope they would be incorporated into the final plan. The planning board made reference to most of them at the last meeting. It included trees, wetland buffer, drainage easement, fence along the north property line, and stormwater controls. The need for some tree removals is evident. There are dead trees in poor condition, trees reaching out over the parking lot for sunlight, and a few trees will also require removal due to new site lighting. The 2 conditions in the draft resolution, number 15, that planting and erosion control plans shall be revised to provide tree removal and tree protection to the satisfaction of the town engineer and the town planner. And on item number 21, page 10, the town regulated tree removal is not contemplated. There are trees that need attention that would be over 8 inches, which is a town regulated tree. And this whole area of tree removal, looking at the trees, identifying which ones should be removed, should be part of the plan. The wetland buffer, it appears that no building improvements will be made.
What number do you want?
Well, this isn't, what I'm talking about now is just general wetland buffer.
It's not in the resolution.
It's not in the resolution. It appears that no building improvements will be made within the wetland buffer. Repaving of the parking area, tree removal, cleanup of debris in the northeast corner of the site, and reduction of impervious area is contemplated. All those things are recommended. In our view, the town wetland edge is very close to the outlet drainage pipe in the northeast corner. It's located right adjacent to the sanitary sewer pump station. And the 100-foot buffer comes very close to the building. I don't think it touches any part of the building. But that was suggested that town wetland consultant revisit that and make sure that we have correct wetland buffer identified on the plan. Tonight, it was suggested that the location for the dumpsters is also in that location, which is the closest to the drainage outlet to Wampus Brook Park. And blowing papers and debris, which is adjacent to that lowest area, should really be looked at, or some way to confine any debris that or flowing out of liquid flowing out of the dumpsters. So that should be looked at very carefully, I think. There is a drainage easement that extends over 100 feet long from that corner, from the drainage pipe into the park. And that's been there, that was given from the town to Werber, the developer of that site, back in the 60s, I would guess. And it's our suggestion that the maintenance requirements of that easement by the town to them be identified and put in practice. There's a fence along the north property line that's in disrepair. The eastern sections, 8-foot sections, I guess, are falling down, and I gather that will be part of the improvements of the site. Getting to stormwater controls, presently there's no evidence of stormwater treatment on the site prior to discharge into the Wampus Brook Park. It's understood that treatment is proposed at several locations within the site, and we heard about some of those tonight. Drainage structures that not only reduce pollutants, but also provides some reduction of stormwater volume to the Wampus River is also encouraged. Thank you.
Thank you, John. You picked up something that we did too. I already discussed with Adam that there's a conflict in the resolution between item 17 and 21. You're absolutely right. One talks about no treatment. So I'm going to suggest that there are a number of things in this resolution that need to be redone somewhat. And I'm going to suggest, Adam, that we add in both of those clauses, once we get them conformed, that we add conservation board as well as town planner to when we get to resolving what trees are going to be pruned, what trees are going to be removed. Let's keep conservation in that loop. Just so you know, this draft resolution is what becomes at the end of the process that we're going through now, site plan review. All of the items that you've heard tonight and all of the requirements of the applicant are set forth in this resolution. It's really a complete list of all of the items that the town professionals in this board have been negotiating over the past number of months. And just to give you an idea, it doesn't look like a big document, but it makes reference to 21 different site plans. Then there are, I didn't realize this, if I counted correctly, there are 53 clauses that the applicant, that describe what the applicant is required to do or what is expected by the town. For example, one of those whereas clauses deals with the Hergenhan curb cut, but there's 52 other items. And once that's all been settled, we then come to, we eventually, assuming we eventually pass, approve a site plan, there are 25 conditions that have to be met by the applicant. Very specific conditions having to do with stormwater, having to do with traffic and leading codes and signage and lighting and whatnot. 25 separate conditions that would have to be met before we would be able to sign a site plan. And before he gets the applicant, any applicant gets a building permit. In this case, we got 4 additional conditions, and there are 11 miscellaneous conditions. So I'm not just bringing you through this because perhaps some of you don't realize the amount of detail that goes into evaluating a project like this. And it may not seem obvious because a lot of this is done with our professionals in meetings that are held in the planning office. So I would like to just be sure that we've covered everyone. There's no one else who wants to speak. Yes, we have.
Mary Ruggiero, R-U-G-G-I-E-R-O. Who is funding this project to do this property?
Mario, we can't hear you.
Oh, who is funding this project to do the property over? CBS, Mr. Werber? You know, you're his lawyer, you don't know.
Chairman.
Chairman, Mario,
You don't ask us questions.
Who's funding the project to do the buildings over? Who's going to pay to do the buildings over?
Oh, who's funding it?
Yeah.
Well, I couldn't give you an exact breakdown, but I can tell you from working with the professionals and doing this myself, it would certainly be some combination of the owner of the property who will be paying for and taking care of certain items that he needs to anyway, and then a tenant would be expected to pick up some of the expenses.
On the inside of the building?
On the inside.
So Mr. Werber is going to do the
Yeah, so
outside?
it's certainly a combination of financial contributions from Mr. Werber, from CBS.
Now, I honestly don't care if CBS comes into town or CBS doesn't come. Well, when Mr. Werber does this property over, they mentioned the front of the building and the side of the building here, they're gonna whitewash it. And the drive-through over here. They never said nothing about the back of Fernando's, Japanese restaurant, and the drive-throughs. Is that gonna be repaired? Because that property looks like tobacco road. And the one across the street where Village Prime looks the same, it's catching up to it. I'm asking you, Mr. Green, I'm just looking over here.
I realize that, yeah. You don't have a rendering of the back of the building because that's not the featured new architecture. But yes, we have required the applicant, and I don't know who will be paying for this because from the planning board standpoint, we sort of don't care who pays for it. But where all of the elements that you see now that are new and revitalized wrap around the building. The garbage that's there now, right now it's not in compliance with Westchester County or even the town's requirements for trash management. New dumpsters, new enclosures for those dumpsters, new paint job, it's the back of the center. It's not going to look as nice as the front of the center, but I understand exactly what your question is, because right now it's pretty much a terrible mess. And will probably remain that way until a building permit is pulled. There's no sense in trying to fix up the back of an empty building, so that's one of the reasons that the site plan approval will address all of those issues.
Like I said, I don't care if it comes and it don't come. I'll still do my accountant's laws. That's why but they have to be held to standards. And when I say that, I take my wife on places in my home. They like to go to Portchester, they like to go to Harrison, Rye. I see CVS's. They have loading docks. But what do? They unload their trucks in front of the store. They line them up in front of the store. Never use the loading docks. Anybody here from CVS? Mr. Green?
Again,
I don't want to see this in my town.
I'm not sure what your question is.
My question is, are they going to use the loading dock? Because a lot of CVS's don't use their loading docks. They unload the truck in front of the store, they line them up in front of the stores, they ice them out, they roll them in.
Well,
I don't want that going on in my house.
I can't.
I drove down, let me tell you something, Mr. Green, I'm not against you, honestly, I went down Main Street today and I said, what happened to my town? The building that they're putting up on Maple Avenue doesn't fit this town. spending too much money. What we have to do is we have to go to our town officials and make sure they put something on the books that this doesn't happen again, that a big chainsaw comes into Armonk. But there's nothing that we can do about it now. We got two Gata plazas, Town Square, which should have never been there, and CVS. So now we have to live with it. The only thing I'm saying is, I hope they live up to their standards, because Mr. Worker fixes things, and that's it. The grass could be this high, the garbage could be this high in the parking lot. He don't care. I'm not knocking him. I'm not being mean to him. That's the way he is. And if we have a code enforcer, he should go around, and when he sees it, he should enforce the code and give fines out. We don't want this going on in the town anymore. And we're talking about storm water runoff. We have a bus garage right next to the lake. With all the buses, the diesel fuel can run. You have a cemetery with all the formaldehyde that can go into it. You got the where they treat the poop right next to it. Anything can happen in life. Be a watchdog group. Watch CVS. Make sure they do the right thing.
Thank you, Tara. I have a question for Roland. My sense is that, I think everyone's finished talking. My sense is that we can close the public hearing, but before you give me advice on that, there is one issue. By the way, there's a number of things that are brought up tonight. We've all taken notes, and there's nothing that we won't take a very hard look at and be sure that it's addressed by the professionals and included in the resolution. The resolution that's before us now needs so many changes that we couldn't vote on it tonight if we wanted to without sitting here for quite some time marking it up. But there is one issue that goes beyond approval subject to our professionals, and that's the resolution of the reciprocal easement agreement that needs to be put in place between Mr. Werber and Mr. Stone. That won't be a problem, I'm sure, by their attorneys, because there are no business deals, no business parts of, no requirements that are being negotiated. They've agreed to all the business points. It's just now a matter of papering what they've agreed to. It shouldn't take very long, but I wouldn't be comfortable signing off the resolution until I knew that that was put to bed. So my question is, with that left open, can we close the public hearing and delay our vote on the site plan approval until our next meeting?
Well, I'm concerned with closing the public hearing is Mr. Baker has pointed out there are several pieces of communications that he has not had access to. I don't know why that is, but once he does have them, he may want to comment on those. And I think rightly they should have that opportunity to do that.
I agree.
So I think we should adjourn the hearing and keep it open for that reason.
Okay. And to that extent, Mr. Baker, would you just let us know what you're missing? So
Yeah, I'll send a letter in the next.
if we could get it, we'll certainly be sure you have everything you need. Any comments or questions from members of the planning board?
I had one, just addressing the draft resolution, which again, we're going to be massaging, but it seemed that what was left out was the sidewalk frontage on Main Street. I thought we had talked about the applicant improving that, but I don't see it in here.
Yeah, that's a condition of the approval.
It's in the conditions.
Okay, very good.
Bob, I had a couple of comments. Thanks for everybody's comment. We've been looking at this project for a while, obviously, but it's always refreshing to hear other people's input. I learned a couple of things tonight. I have a question. Is it a CVS representative here tonight? My question, let me just cut to the chase. I've never been a fan of the drive-through from the get-go. I'm not sure, I know that some of the town people may have requested it. Logistically, and looking at it, because it's going to have to be built up to get to the first floor elevation, so to speak. Adding a 3-foot wall and actually negotiating a large SUV in that channel. Yes, it works, but it was made to work. I'm not sure if, I think the circulation of the back, especially for emergency vehicles, would be much better equipped if this was just a forgotten addition to the project. I'm not sure how CBS feels about this, but I think the circulation would be much better. And I have a wife and 2 kids, and I think it's just a very congested area back there, and I'm not sure how they feel. But if it's wiped off the site plan, in my opinion, it's a good idea. And that's why I wanted people here to comment if they chose anything according to that. It narrows, especially you said, I think the gentleman said it was a 3-foot high wall that would be necessary. Okay, take that in a couple of snowstorms, and there's a couple of snow piles building up on each side. The whole area is more narrow, narrow, which can create some problems in negotiating trucks and or cars going back and forth. Especially with the Hergenham connection, it can be a clustered, a very clustered area, which is a good thing. One other comment I had was regarding the Hergenham connection. And Neil Bauman made a great point. I think it will be, especially with Armand Square going in, and it's going to be a quick cut through to 128 North. And this facility is heavily used. And the quote was, I don't know who I'm quoting here, but when do we decide and determine if the decision was wrong in allowing that cut through? God forbid, after something bad happens. To me, I couldn't live with that. Yes, you can always put a guardrail up after it's done, but I'd like to really scrutinize that connection further, because I believe that there will be, especially with children and seniors and so on and so forth. I do think that the path of least resistance is a very attractive thing once you have a light backing up and so on and so forth. I could be wrong, I'm not a traffic expert, but it's just it's a large concern of mine. And Mario made a good point. I haven't seen the facade, the back facade. We've had great renderings, and I appreciate all the renderings from the front and the side of the CVS, but we haven't seen the back facade, even as plain as it is. It's just painted. There was no real specifications on that back. And is there any mechanism, maybe this is for Adam, is there any mechanism to ensure that the CVS and or other tenants will keep the dumpsters and closures clean and so on and so forth? In a perfect world, everything is neat and tidy. But any exposed dumpsters left open with heavy rainwater will just take any debris that's in that container and wash it right out to the back. So is there any mechanisms other than town code enforcement officers doing their job? Is there anything that we can get some kind of assurances from the tenants that they will adhere to these standards?
All the comments on the Herget end, it turns out to be the least, or say the best way to handle a bad situation, because right now you have people coming into the Herget Center, into their parking lot on an entry drive. They can only handle one car. So anytime someone wants to leave that lot, there's the opportunity, we can't pass one another. So someone has to either back up onto the street to let that person out of the lot or vice versa. So, I never thought of it as an experiment, but talking with Adam and talking with the traffic people, they seem to believe that it's not perfect, but it's better than what is there now. And as I said to Neil Bauman, I guess if it winds up turning into an issue, and we notice that, we can revisit the decision, because you can put up 2 bollards in a chain and cut that exit off in 10 minutes.
Yeah, and there's really a range of ways to deal with it. The most extreme would be terminating it, there are traffic calming measures that we could employ on that driveway if we needed to.
I think that that should be actually included in this discussion. Let's take the initiative to do it beforehand. Whether it be on the Bergen Hand Drive and so on and so forth. Let's try to minimize it or just take the advanced step to get these traffic reduction speeds or speed bumps and so on and so forth. To minimize it before something bad happens.
I did make a note, one thing that's good, I guess maybe AJ and Mr. Werber take a note of it. I think we have kind of ignored the back of the center. We talked about it, and I'm sure based on, I must say, based on the terrific cooperation we've had from, and you never know if it's Mr. Werber or Mr. CDS who's paying for it, but they've both been very cooperative in the schemes of all of the professional and the planning board's hands. We've kind of ignored a specific set of criteria for the very back. So I think Steve's right. We should probably just memorialize what we've talked about so that everyone understands what that back will be. Understand the back is not being redesigned. There's no new facade back there. But everyone who's ever driven behind that property knows that it needs some help in cleaning up and restoration. So we'll get a little bit more specific between now and next week.
Oh, Kevin can do it now.
Oh, maybe there's something we've missed.
If I may, these elevations are part of your package. They should be, and were submitted at the time with all the other site plans, as well as the floor plan of the proposed storm. These are existing. The proposed elevations in your set do call for the back of the project to be repointed, all the masonry, to be pressure washed to remove any loose finishes. And then the entire plaza, the paint that was picked out by the design review was a light gray. I think it was called silver plate. But everything's getting painted, cleaned up, and refinished.
Thank you. I missed it. I hadn't paid attention to that elevation. I'm not sure we got it when we were addressing the front and the sides. Any other comments or questions from?
If I could have
Sure.
I would like to see the applicant in the intervening time, see if he can't convert some of these 20-plus conditions prior to signing. He's been working with the planning department to convert those into whereas clauses in this resolution. I'm kind of in agreement with Mr. Baker's comment, and I've said this in the past, I just haven't pursued it, that a lot of resolutions that this planning board passes, dozens of comments where we're seemingly handing off to staff things that need to be addressed, and we're taking that out of the public purview. I don't think it's right, especially on these more controversial applications, that we're laying off design things that are going to make changes on the site plan, and we're laying them off on the judgment of some one individual that's on town staff or town retainer, and the public's not getting to see it. Nor are we as members of the planning board. Maybe Mr. Green has seen it, and he goes to the planning department more than I do. I would like to see the applicant heed Mr. Favis' comments with regard to stormwater, although he may not be required to. I think in this day and age, it behooves us to take better care of our water quality. Ormoc and the waters of Ormoc are extremely high-quality waters. When I look at, I'm a professional engineer, and I work in northern Westchester, Putnam County, and you would think that the waters up there would be a little more pristine. I'm absolutely surprised when I look at the DEC information at how much more pristine many of or most of the waters in this town are by comparison to those that one would think would be more so up north of here, where things are a little
developed. I'm not satisfied necessarily with the explanation that was offered. There was no explanation offered about loading and going down to one space. I don't recall how we got there. I know I missed a meeting or two of late. I don't know when this application was up for the meeting. I also recall reading something about the curbing. Here, we're taking a site, we're redoing the building, the facade, we're cleaning this place up, we're putting all new pavement in, all new striping in, and correct me if I'm wrong, anyone on the board or the applicant or Adam, but it doesn't appear or seem as we're going to put new curbing in, so we're going to have all this wonderful stuff surrounded by a ribbon of God knows how old curbing. It's going to look silly.
No, it will be replaced.
Yes, but the point is the applicant is not putting in new curbing.
No,
So
yeah,
my question is, what condition is the curbing in? Then I stand corrected. That's not correct. Recall reading yesterday. And I have to apologize on the economic report. I personally have never stepped foot in the A&P in Armonk. I live in North White Plains. We had an A&P in North White Plains. It too did not have a pharmacy, and ironically, it's now a CVS. Thank you.
Good. One more time. Anybody need a comment? If not, I would move that we adjourn the public meeting until, what's that, the 11th? Is our next meeting?
Correct. Thursday.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Next agenda item.